Chapter 1. You can keep Christmases, birthdays and all that. For me, the high time of the year was always my summer holidays at Treguinnessysaf, Uncle Rob and Auntie Larry's farm down by the sea in Wales. It was a place of clambering rocks, ratty barns and fields of shifting sheep and uddery cows. You could pick up the warm eggs, you could clean down the milking parlour. And all around were the cliffs and beaches where we basked and swam with the seals, where we watched killer whales and porpoises. For a city boy like me, it was paradise, and I never wanted anything better. Nothing could have been better. You could lean against the wind on Buzzard Rock. You could loll laughing in the fields, fly Barry's yellow kite, or race his battered boats across the duck pond. Every year was the best, but best of all was the summer of the Sandman, the giant turtles, and the great grey cucumber. I arrived as usual by train, and Auntie Hilary's was there to pick me up, all smile and kisses and smelling of milk. But no Barry. I soon found out why. Only happened yesterday morning, she said, fighting with the gear lever. Playing football he was in that top field with his da. You know the rocky field beyond the sheep dip pit? Tripped and broke his leg in 2 places. Nasty. Plastered he is all the way up, and he's got 6 stitches in his head. Blood all over the place. Concussion maybe. We've got to keep him quiet for a couple of days. She patted my knee. There we are then, you're here now. That'll cheer him up. It was a blow. Barry was my cousin, of course, but he was also my best friend in all the world. Like 2 sides of a coin we were, but as different as chalk and cheese. Barry was a head taller than me, ran faster, and knew where and how to catch fish. He could sweeten up a fox just by whistling through his throat like a screaming rabbit, and no one played practical jokes like Barry, no one. As for me, I read a lot of books, played chess like a Russian master, and could say the alphabet backward in less than 4 seconds flat. Auntie Hilary talked all the way back to the farm, but I never heard a word. I was wondering what I was going to do with myself for the whole month with Barry's leg in plaster. There we are now, she said. We're home.
Polly came skipping out of the car as we pulled up outside the house. Polly was Barry's little sister, only 7 years old, and was bouncy like a puppy. She was maybe a little bigger than the year before, but not much, and I noticed she was missing her 2 top front teeth. She took my hand at once and dragged me off. Barry's busted his leg, she said cheerfully. Barry was pumped up on the sitting room sofa in his pajamas. His great white leg seemed twice as long as the other one and twice as fat. He wiggled his chalky toes at me. Hello, Mike. He grinned. I've busted my leg, and he patted the plaster. So I see, I said. Dad's fault, he went on. He tripped me. I never, said Polly. I won't tell you what Barry said, but I felt at home already. Tea time brought Uncle Rob and Dad in. From the fields, and Auntie Hilary had made a tea of Welsh cakes and scones and raspberry jam and cream. I never liked the first meal though. I suppose I always felt a bit awkward. They all kept asking me questions about Mum, about school, except Darky. That's my granddad, who just smiled at me and pushed the cream closer. Eat up, Michael. There's a good boy, he said. We'll fatten you up if it's the last thing we do. Later it was Polly's bath time, and she came down in her primrose dressing gown with her blue butterflies, all pink and clean she was, and she just said, and she said she'd have her story now. What about please then, said Darky, frowning at her. Please, said Polly sweetly. Darky was about the only one who could make her behave.
Lap in the deep brown armchair with the stuffing coming out of the arms, and he'd always begin, "Let me see now." Of course I was too old to sit in his lap. It was Polly's turn these days, but I listened just the same. Everyone did. We all knew every word, every sentence of every story, but you never tired of them because he told them like he was telling for the first time, like they were really true, and you could join in whenever you liked. We were all there that evening when Dad's began with the story of the Sandman, all about those rocks down on White Sands Beach that looked like a great fat giant lion asleep in the sand. So we all started snoring. He fell asleep there thousands and thousands of years ago after a terrible storm-tossed journey across the island in a huge coracle pulled by 3 giant turtles. Now there's not many who know.
Children. But if you stay in one place for long enough, you turn into rock. True now. And we all froze stiff where we were. And that's just what happened to the Sandman and the 3 giant turtles. They turned into 3 turtle rocks out in the bay. And his huge great coracle, the one that was wrecked in the storm, well, we all know what became of that, don't we? And we all nodded and chorused, "Coracle Island!" Dadsy went on, "They've none of them moved a muscle in thousands of years, and that's how they'll stay until the Sandman wakes up. And just as soon as he wakes up, and one day he will, he'll want to go back home to Ireland where he belongs. Fair play. But the thing is, children, he'll only wake up when he feels someone loves him enough to feed him and look after him and help him home to Ireland." "I will," said Polly. "Of course you will," Dadsy said, and he laughed and lit his pipe. Another one," said Polly, wafting away the smoke. "And an old trick this. I'd done it myself. You talk Dadsy into another story, and another story, and another story, so you never have to go to bed. It wasn't that difficult either, because Dadsy loved telling his stories. He'd settle back, puff his pipe, and off he'd go again. Next he told us about the one about the lighthouse on Coracle Island, and the lighthouse keeper, an old Russian sea captain called, and we all chanted his name together, Sergei Ivanovich Prokofiev. On a dark and dreadful night over 100 years ago, Sergei Ivanovich Prokofiev, captain of the fastest clipper in the Russian merchant fleet, was caught in a hurricane and driven onto Coracle Rock. He lost his ship and most of his crew with it. It
wasn't his fault. He wasn't his fault, but he blamed himself just the same. It was the shame of it that kept him from going home to Russia. Instead, he stayed and became a lighthouse keeper on Coracle Rock, and every night without fail the light shone from the lighthouse to warn away ships. Then one night the light never came on, and when they went to find out what the matter was, he had disappeared. They found the door locked from the inside. They had to pick the lock. Inside was all shipshape, the bed made, the washing up done, and one of the windows left open, and on the table they found an empty cake tin. Welsh cakes were his favourite. A sky blue teapot, and there was more. A chest of drawers with a clock that had stopped at precisely 5 o'clock. A bottle of vodka with an empty glass beside it. They found his clothes folded neatly on top of an old sea chest, and a gull's feather by the window. "Can't be a shadow of a doubt about it, children," said Sergei, as he turned himself into a seagull so he could fly home at last to Russia. There's some say Dadke was finishing in a flurry of pipe smoke, that if you were to put the light on going again in the lighthouse, then you would bring old Sergei, and we all chorused together, Ivanik Pervik, back to the lighthouse so he could cook himself some more Welsh cakes and pour himself a nice cup of tea. "Shivery," said Polly, "and please could you have the dragon story now? Please, Dadka," she pleaded. "I want one about the spiky blood-red dragon that sleeps on his treasure in the damp dark lair down by Whale-Tooth Beach. I like it when the little people come creeping across the pebbles to steal his treasure, and he hears the stones crunching, and it wakes him up, and he chases them, and
they run away as fast as they can, and he breathes out his fire and his thick black smoke, and he frizzles them up so they're all turned into standing stones up on Buzzard Rock. Tell us that one, please, Dadsy." "But, Polly, there's nothing much left to tell now, is there?" said Dadsy, laughing. "You've just gone and told it all yourself, haven't you?" "There we are then," said Auntie Ellery, seizing her opportunity. "Say good night now, Polly." "Cut your goose there," Barry sniggered. "Dumbo," said Polly, and then she had to go. If there was one thing Uncle Rob could not stand, it was arguments. Barry and I lay in the dark and chatted away into the night. We had a whole year to catch up on, with just a little bit of sleep in between. We were still at it at breakfast, when Polly announced that she would be going to the beach. Not on your own, you're not, said Auntie Ellery, and Polly looked across the table at me with the smile of a tyrant. He's busy, said Barry firmly. Pegleg, said Polly. Parrot, said Barry. That'll be enough of that, Uncle Rob growled from behind his newspaper. As usual, it was Auntie Ellery who kept the peace and sorted it all out. I would be shared. I'd spend the mornings, if that was all right with me, with Polly down on the beach, and the afternoons with Barry. Barry was none too happy about it, but he perked up when I said we could maybe fly his kite that afternoon if the wind was right. So there I was then, tripping down through the fields to White Sands Beach with Polly leading me like a donkey. And like a donkey, it was me who carried the bucket, the spade, and the towels, and the picnic.